And we're live. It is Tuesday, July 29th. It is 2025, the year of our Lord. It is 8 a.m. And this is, I gotta tell you, one of those days where I just kind of roll out of bed 5 or 10 minutes before the show, pour myself another cup of coffee in an inexplicable spider mug, and hope that someone else shows up on the show, which in this case is the estimable Mike Feinberg. I'm not entirely awake yet, and my mind is a bit of a blank. So it was a relief, and I mean a relief, to hear that Mike Feinberg has been up for hours reading IG reports, which is a text, by the way, that I've never received before in my life. Um, I've had the I'm busy with reading about the Arctic from Nastya, and I've got the uh, but like reading IG reports recreationally is, I've gotten a lot of like, I've been allowed to go see the IG report before they savage me, but only in a sealed room with, where you have to wear like a gas mask to, uh, and I wasn't allowed to take notes, and I'm not allowed to tell you about it. Yeah, I've gotten that a few times. But the kind of recreational reading of IG reports is a new one for me because they're usually dry as dust. And the classic IG report is, we looked at this big complicated issue. We didn't find any serious problems, but we're gonna find that so and so was inaccurate when she said that, you know the the guy was inappropriate in the room with green wallpaper, and the wallpaper was actually kind
Chartreuse.
of more chartreuse. That's the sort of classic IG report. And so we're going to recommend disciplinary action. Um, Mike, why have you been recreationally reading old IG reports?
I would take great issue with the adverb recreationally. I am working on a book proposal over the next few weeks, and it encompasses a lot of FBI history, and the IG has written extensively on many of the issues which are going to be in the book. And I figured this was a quicker way to refresh my memory as to some of the things to which I was an inside spectator that will be a lot quicker than going through the FOIA process, which I still plan to do, but is not going to be something I could do at 5 in the morning over a cup of coffee. Printing out an IG report and reading it very much is.
Hey, folks, the sun is shining. The birds are chirping. I don't have any cactuses with me because Holly has removed them all. But it's going to be a great freaking day, and you are watching Dog Shirt TV, and it is a goddamn revolution in morning television. And one of the revolutionary features is that we have guests on in the morning who are not merely up at 5 drinking coffee and but choosing between reading IG reports and going through the FOIA process. Um, and another one of the revolutionary features is that we exhaust some of the first few minutes of the show vamping, and then ultimately relating that vamp to some of the revolutionary features of the show. And just other shows just don't do that. So, look, all of which is a long winded way of saying that we're not allowed to have fun anymore. And it is a tragedy that we're not allowed to have fun anymore, because it used to be that we got up in the morning we had our coffee, and then we went into the fields and ran and jumped and played, like gazelles or, little bunnies. But now we don't do that anymore. We have live stream shows, and we spend our days live streaming and watching live streams, and the whole thing is just a kind of narcotic cycle of live streaming and watching live streams. And eventually someone's going to figure out that you can get all meta about this and live stream yourself watching live streams, kind of the way people do on Twitch with video games. And they're going to have live streams of themselves watching live streams with other people who were watching them, and it's going to be an infinite kind of Gödelian loop of uh, um, uh, uh, you know, it's just going to be a thing. But until then, welcome to the show today. As I say, I just rolled out of bed, and boy, have I not read an IG report. Maybe Mike can live stream himself reading IG reports.
That would be the most boring live stream probably in the history of the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all started with the cam girls, and it gets, more and more boring from there. And I think we should just uh, accept that, since AI is going to take over and do all the work, our job is really just going to be to provide fodder for mockery and entertainment of each other. And in some cases, that will be, you won't need to read an AI, a IG report, because the AI will read it for you, and won't even need to summarize it for you, because you just won't need to know what the IG has done, because the AIs will know what the IG has done. And by the way, the IG will be an AI, and it will be supervising other AI agents, get it, that will be interviewing people and producing reports. But so all that we will have to do left is live stream to each other and take selfies. And so if you think about it, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm live streaming and I'm taking selfies. And that's really it. That's all there is left of life until the asteroid comes and destroys us all.
Oh, I'm ready to face the day. That's heartening.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just saying it's the logical conclusion of everywhere we're headed.
It is. Not to reduce everything to a film reference, but have you seen Fassbinder's World on a Wire?
I have not.
It's worth seeing. It came out, I think, in the mid '70s. If you're in the mood for a 4-hour German philosophical sci-fi film, you can't go wrong. But it is basically
I'm
just
very
about.
seldom in that mood, by the way. I
He's
mean,
also,
not never,
yeah.
but, you know, I sort of think when I'm in the mood for a film about the ponderous German soul, I usually satisfy it by watching Wings of Desire. Um,
We actually have hanging in our living room a huge Wings of Desire poster.
Yeah, I mean, but I can see the 4 hour part, does have will to live implications.
Not as much as his 26-hour adaptation of Berlin Alexanderplatz.
Yeah, well, that one has less.
Attraction for you?
No, I was going to say it has less will to live implications, because the chances that I would even start watching it are so minimal. Um, but the 4 hour one, you can fool yourself that you're gonna actually watch this and not get bored, and then you're about 47 minutes into it and you're picking at scabs you didn't even know you had to keep yourself awake. Um,
It's not that. I mean, it's an interesting sci-fi film. It was the first one to really delve into the possibility of multiple layers of reality where some individuals are living in a simulation and you're never quite sure which level you're on at any given point. It's our conversation about AI taking over and us having very little agency in our own lives just sort of reminded me of it.
well, I look forward to AI taking over and running lawfare so that I don't have to do it anymore. That's my, any AI that wants to step in and run lawfare, you know, welcome. And You figure out AI how to replace Quinta Jurassic because I sure can't. Um, but all right, enough witty or not so witty banter. What is on your mind this morning other than IG reports?
Uh, at the risk of doing a bit of shameless self, this may not be self promotion because I haven't actually read it yet. I did about 3 minutes ago get a message from one Quinta Jurassic that a profile she wrote of me for The Atlantic has just been published. So I will be anxious for the next 49 minutes while we're on here, not knowing what it says. But
Well, should we do a reading? I
you
think
want
we're
to do like
going to.
you want to do like an annotated reading where
Yeah, we
you
can do
read
an
things and I
annotated reading,
respond to
but
it?
you should text Quinta and let her know in case she wants to show up
I
for
I will do that right now.
it. I will pull up the article and we're going to. The headline is The FBI Leaders Have No Idea What They're Doing. A casualty of Trump's purge speaks out. And little did Quinta know when she wrote this piece um, that we would be reading it live and discussing it with its subject, which is something that, by the way, when you write a profile, you don't really expect a live reading
No,
from
no.
the subject. So if I were Quinta, I might not show up for this just because, like, it's having your work analyzed in real time by the subject is
Well, having a profile of you written is like having your life analyzed in
yes,
real
I
time by
have.
the author. So we are getting meta here.
Yeah, have I ever told you about the time I had a profile of me written? It's really
No.
only happened once.
Okay.
Um, so um, it was back during the baby canon days when I was having my 15 minutes and everybody was referring to me. It was like an appellation next to my name, friend of Comey. And Jim and I had this joke about it that I had no independent
Yeah.
identity, that I was like Tonto or something. Um, uh, and New York Magazine decides to do a profile of me, and they send this reporter with a very Dutch name. It was like
Mhm.
Vandenhoeven or something, and he and I meet at the Tabard Inn,
Okay.
and which is where I it's kind of my lunch spot.
Mhm.
And I did not know this at the time, but he took note of everything I ate, which is like, okay, it's totally fair.
Yeah.
But if I'd known that he was going to stick in the story, not just where we ate,
Yeah.
but what I ate, I wouldn't have ordered a bacon cheeseburger because then all my semi-religious friends are like, "Did you have to eat trafe? It's like it's bad for the Jews." Um, and but the proprietors of the Tabard Inn were thrilled by it because
Yeah.
I got them written up in New York Magazine, and we've been friends ever since. And so it was bad for the Jews, but good for the Tabard that I had a bacon cheeseburger. All right. The FBI's leaders have no idea what they're doing. A casualty of Trump's purge speaks out by Quinta Jurecic.
So I should be clear. I have no idea what this piece says yet.
Yeah,
Apparently, my
that's why
wife
this is
has
going to
read
be
it,
fun.
but I have not.
This is going to be fun.
For
We're
some of us,
and
yeah.
we like. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on Quinta to join us here.
I just messaged her, so
Yeah, because I think just what the world needs is a confrontation between author and subject here.
I doubt it'll come to that, but
But you never know. Uh, you should join us. We are having a live reading of your profile of Mike with Mike. Um, all right.
all right.
See, this doesn't happen on Fox and Friends or Joe and Mika. I mean, where else? Um, All right. Michael Feinberg had not been planning to leave the FBI, but on May 31st, he received a phone call from his boss. And what's the name of your boss, Mike Feinberg?
Dominique Evans. She's the current special agent in charge of the Norfolk field office.
Right. So you guys should all tweet that, Dominique Evans, with your link to this story.
That is not that commandment or order is not coming from me.
No, I am, look, this is an annotated reading. There are your annotations, there are my annotations.
All right.
Asking him about a personal friendship with a former FBI agent who was known for criticizing President Donald Trump. Feinberg, an assistant special agent in charge at the FBI's field office in Norfolk, realized right away that he was in the crosshairs of the Bureau's leadership at an unusually chaotic time. If his 15-year career at the Bureau was coming to an end, he wanted to depart with at least some dignity rather than being marched out the door. By the following afternoon, he had resigned. All right, your thoughts on paragraph number 1.
It's accurate. It's quite accurate. The entire, and maybe it's weird for me to comment before I've seen what else she writes, but the entire thing took maybe 16 hours.
Yeah. All right. The FBI has long seen itself as an organization built on expertise. Its founder, J. Edgar Hoover, was an early and devoted advocate of professionalizing the government bureaucracy to the point of mandating that agents wear a dark suit and striped tie. I hate striped ties.
They're like half the ties I own.
I don't like stripes. I mean, you know, it's just look. J. Edgar Hoover and I have relatively little in common,
Yeah.
and this is relatively low down the list of our differences. But I don't like the striped tie thing.
Interestingly, and I don't mean to interrupt the paragraph, early in my career when I was in Los Angeles as a case agent, we did find a document, I forget where, one of my friends dug it up, that was written by Hoover and mandated what agents were allowed to wear and carry on arrests. And two details stuck out for me. One is you were supposed to wear a hat when you went on the arrest, and one of the things you were authorized to carry was a blackjack, which I'm pretty sure is not authorized anymore. But
Well, I like blackjacks. I think it's a good weapon. As someone who has trained in Aikido over long periods of time, I really like versions of the staff of all kinds.
Yeah.
I will point out to you all that the algorithm knows me well, and in the advertisement that it is serving me is for lasers. Um, and I bet most of you don't get laser ads, but I get a lot of them. Now, however, the Bureau is in the early stages of something like a radical deprofessionalization. The most important quality for an FBI official to have now appears to be not competence, but loyalty. The exiling of Feinberg and others like him is an effort to engineer and accelerate this transformation. Feinberg's boss, and good on Quinta Jurecic for naming her. I hope you all name her in your tweets and sharings about this. Special Agent in Charge Dominique Evans didn't allege any misconduct on his part, Feinberg told me. Rather, as Feinberg set out in his resignation letter the following day, Evans explained that FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, and just pause a minute over this phrase, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino. You know, I remember there was a comedian when I was like 20 who used to just walk out on stage and say, George Bush. And everybody would burst out laughing. And George Bush was not actually a comical figure. He was an extremely substantive figure, but there is something about his demeanor that just made him a little bit comical, a little bit laughable. Um, and truly believe that is why he lost the 1992 election. Dan Bongino, if you were a comedian and you just walked out on stage and you said FBI director, deputy director Dan Bongino, that's a laugh line, and it's only a little bit because the name Bongino has some of what Frank Zappa used to call humor something. FBI Director, Deputy Director Dan Bongino had found out that Feinberg had maintained a friendship with the former counterintelligence agent Peter Strzok, a longtime target of Trump's ire. During Trump's first term, Strzok was fired from the FBI and became a recurring target of Fox News segments after the Justice Department released text messages in which he disparaged the president. Trump had repeatedly attacked him over his work on the Bureau's 2016 investigation into Russian election interference, a topic of renewed interest for the president these days. The association between Feinberg and Strzok was enough for the Bureau to cancel a potential promotion for Feinberg, he told me. Evans, Feinberg said, suggested that he might face demotion and that he would soon have to take a polygraph test about his friendship with Strzok. He quit instead. The FBI declined to comment on what it characterized as a personnel matter. When I reached out to Norfolk in hopes of speaking with Evans, the field office declined to comment as well. Your thoughts?
None so far. I think we're still in the sort of throat clearing what's already been made public stage, so I'll let us continue until we get to things that have not yet been discussed in the Twitter sphere or Blue Sky or whatever.
All right. In his resignation letter, Feinberg lamented the decay of the FBI and proceeded to write a treatise about decadence and turn of the century French poetry.
I was very inspired by Oswald Spengler in
Yeah,
writing the letter of
I
resignation.
think
Yeah,
I think anytime Mike writes about decay, you have to worry a little bit that we're heading off in a
Germanic purple prose mode.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I recount those events more in sorrow than in anger, he wrote. I love my country and our Constitution with a fervor that mere language will not allow me to articulate, and it pains me that my profession will no longer entail their being their servant. Since leaving the federal workforce, he has decided to speak out because he told me agents still at the Bureau who fear retribution asked him to. Feinberg is now planning to spend time writing about these issues while he, like many other government employees forced out by this administration, figures out what to do next. In a recently published essay, published, I want to add, in Lawfare, by the way, he argued that the FBI has become obsessed with ideological purity and ceaseless politicization of the workforce, which makes us all less safe. Okay, I think Quinta's throat is clear now.
Yeah, I think we're let's move on.
All right. So Feinberg's background is not that of an anti-Trump crusader. He was vice president of the Federalist Society chapter at Northwestern Law School, from which he graduated in 2004, considers himself a conservative. Today, he often uses the work of the conservative political philosopher Edmund Burke as a conversational reference point in discussions of politics. Joined the FBI in 2009, he told me, because he saw it as the best vehicle through which he could help protect both the United States' interests in the world and the rule of law on the domestic front. When he and I first met, sometime around the beginning of the first Trump administration, Feinberg was working on counterintelligence investigations against China. Such was his commitment to the job that he refused on principle to go visit the giant pandas loaned by the Chinese government to the National Zoo.
So we can do an entire 100% accurate. Astute viewers, depending on what the frame of my camera is, will notice a mounted panda head on my bookshelf. I once applied for a license plate in the District of Columbia that was PNDAH8R. I was refused that. But, when I left the Washington field office, my admittedly tongue-in-cheek hatred of pandas because they're sheer propaganda tools was such that my squad got me the mounted panda head, and the other supervisors in my ASAC adopted a panda in my name.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, so I have a question for you about pandas. I do not hate pandas,
Yeah.
but I am convinced that if any species deserves to go extinct,
100%. They are
it
an
is
evolutionary cul-de-sac.
they sit on their babies.
Mhm.
They can only live in one ecosystem.
Yep.
They seem improbable, and getting them to mate is crazy difficult. Um, uh, do you agree with me that, quite apart from our personal feelings about pandas,
Yeah,
uh,
there's ecological and biological reasons that they should be extinct. And I have friends, or I haven't talked to them in quite some time, but I knew people when I lived in DC who worked for the World Wildlife Foundation. And even though a panda is their mascot, they were actually pretty upset at how much attentions pandas get at the expense of other species which do not get the same level of dedication.
yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody wants to defend the panda, that would be a good day for an open mic show, a good subject for an open mic show.
Mhm.
I will say that one of the things about growing up in DC is that you have this, uh, people take you to see the pandas all the time. And so one of the things, David Plotz is the editor of CityCast and former Slate editor, is passionately anti-panda as a result of growing up in Washington and being dragged to see the pandas all the time. And I just want to say I kind of share that. I have no personal beef with pandas, but let's just say if I were hungry and there were only one panda left in the world, I would eat it. Um, Feinberg once trained as both a gymnast and a boxer, and he still carries himself with a scrupulous economy of motion. How do we feel about that sentence?
Um, I'm flattered by it. It's not one I would have thought of myself, but
I don't think of you as particularly still. Um, but I'm hanging on the scrupulous economy of motion. It's a nice turn of phrase. I'm just not 100% sure it quite describes you. He didn't talk about the details of his job much, but we turned out to share an interest in film noir and indie rock, subjects he approached with the same focus and intensity that he applied to matters of national security. I came to consider him a friend. At that point, he was already struggling to understand a conservative movement that seems to have abandoned many of the principles that had attracted him in the first place. Okay, so let's talk about this. When did you come to see yourself as out of step with, or the conservative movement as, how did you ever have a Trump attraction phase like George Conway did, or were you just, that was just never you?
no, part of the reason, aside from mere political philosophy, part of the reason I always considered myself a conservative was that I really do think character and rhetoric matters in leaders. And those are two things that I never saw exhibited by Trump. So I never had a period of flirtation or attraction to his campaign. I actually remember pretty early in the primary being concerned that there were too many people towards the more moderate side of conservatism, that none of them would be able to get a critical mass and defeat him. And that turned out to be the case.
And did you ever, as somebody who was not involved in the Russia investigation, but sort of adjacent to it in that you were also in counterintelligence
Mhm.
and knew a lot of the people involved, did you ever have a flirtation with the idea that they were all on a witch hunt, or that there was no merit to the idea of the investigation in the first place?
Um, no, no. I always, my experience in the counterintelligence division was that it was generally populated by the most intellectually curious and rigorous special agents that I knew in all of headquarters. And, I'm not going to name names of people who were executives at that time, but I had faith in the scrupulousness of their investigations and the rigor of their decision making process.
No reason to doubt the hierarchy that was, um, well,
Correct. Yeah.
at the bottom of the management
Yes.
leadership was Pete Strzok, and then Bill Priestap on top of him, and then
Yep.
Andy McCabe, and then Jim Comey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And look, people tend to forget, Comey was a registered Republican for most of his career and had served prior to becoming director of the FBI solely in Republican administrations. And the notion that he would engage in some sort of witch hunt to help a Democratic presidential candidate is on its face laughable.
Trump, in his second term, has intensified his efforts to transform ostensibly apolitical institutions into tools of his own personal power. This is a dangerous strategy in whatever form it takes, eating away at government expertise, whether at the National Weather Service or the Food and Drug Administration, places lives at risk. But Trump's personalist approach is particularly dangerous when applied to the agencies that can detain, prosecute, and imprison people. In a recent conversation, Feinberg recalled the sociologist Max Weber's famous definition of the state as the entity with a monopoly on the legitimate use of force. Organizations like the FBI are the tool by which that force is exerted, he said, so you need them to be politically pure. Otherwise, the risk grows that the government's violence will be brought down on people who are disfavored by those in power. Mike,
I only have one issue with that paragraph.
mm,
I do not think you could call any quote by Max Weber famous. Not nearly enough people have read him in this day and age, unfortunately. But aside from that, I think it's a pretty accurate statement of my sentiments.
I think if there's one statement by Max Weber that can be said to be famous, it
It's
is
that
that
one.
one.
Yeah.
But I have a question about this. What percentage of FBI special agents have, in your rough estimate, have read Max Weber?
I've never canvassed them, so I couldn't say, but I would guess that it is probably pretty similar to the population as a whole, which is to say, not many. And of those that have read Weber, it's probably more likely that they delved into his works on Protestantism and capitalism as opposed to politics as a vocation.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, The FBI does not have an impeccable track record in this area. In addition to his focus on technocratic institution building, Hoover left behind an unsettled legacy of paranoia and bureaucratic power politics, as well as a willingness to harass political enemies from which the Bureau has never quite managed to disentangle itself. Former FBI Director James Comey kept on his desk Hoover's approved application to wiretap Martin Luther King Jr., which the Bureau planned to use as part of a campaign to drive the civil rights leader to suicide. A reminder, Comey said, of what happens when those in power lack constraint and oversight. Since Hoover's death, the FBI has built up thickets of procedures in an effort to avoid precisely this kind of political targeting. Yet, the FBI without constraint or a political oversight is exactly what Trump wants and what Bongino and FBI Director Kash Patel seem to be working toward. Trump launched his 2024 campaign by declaring to his supporters, I am your retribution. And in their previous lives as MAGA influencers, both Patel and Bongino voiced support for locking up the president's opponent, citing Justice Department sources. Fox News recently reported that the FBI has opened a criminal investigation into former intelligence chiefs who led the government's assessment of Russian election interference in 2016. Should we consider this background throat clearing, or do you
Yeah,
have
I
thoughts
mean,
on that?
I would quibble a little bit. I think Fox News reported that a criminal referral was made, and you yourself have written about this. It's not clear that an investigation has been opened.
Yeah, I mean, I think on one aspect of the IAC, they do seem to have announced that they're investigating it. With another, they said something much more mealy-mouthed.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that either investigation is a real one to the extent that it exists at all. Um, in the first Trump administration, such blatant use of the FBI for political ends would have been an unthinkable breach of law enforcement independence, but the FBI's new leadership has been pushing out many of those who might object. So many people have been driven away, in fact, that after his departure, Feinberg found himself adopted by what he calls an exile community of former Justice Department and FBI officials working to help one another to adjust to post government life. Many have found support in the organization Justice Connection, founded by a longtime Justice Department lawyer to provide support for employees leaving the department. All right, so tell us about the community in exile. Is it like George Smiley and Toby Esterhazy? Like, what's um, Who are these people and what are they doing?
Um, I'm not going to name names because many of them are people who found themselves unexpectedly and unwantedly in the public eye at various points and have since managed to regain a sense of normalcy in their day to day existence. But I will just say, in the days and weeks after my story became public, a number of people, many of whom were strangers to me or people so high above me in the chain of command at the FBI or DOJ, of their own accord reached out to check in and see how I was doing and offer support and encouragement. This was entirely unexpected by me, and I'm not the type to get overtly emotional in public, but I'll just say, like, the past 6 to 8 weeks have been the most difficult of my entire life in so many different ways. That having those expressions of support has meant more than I will ever be able to explain or articulate. It's been a real source of succor for me.
The sad thing, Feinberg told me, is that these exiles began their government careers with the purest and noblest intentions. They're exactly the kind of public servants you'd want steadying the tiller at a time like this, and therefore exactly the people whom Patel and Bongino sought to be rid of. Others who have so far escaped notice are counting down the days until they can retire. Feinberg worries about how this attrition will affect the FBI's culture going forward. He worries about the dwindling number of FBI agents with solid values who are still trying to hang on without old hands to voice principled objections. Newer and younger employees are going to become acculturated to a politicized bureaucracy. He told me that will seem normal to them. Thoughts?
Yeah, this is you know the agent I eventually became was not molded at Quantico. It was molded during my first couple years in the Los Angeles field office when I was really learning how to run an investigation, not just in the sense of what I needed to do from a logistical or evidentiary standpoint, but in the sense of developing the emotional judgment and maturity to know when those steps may be appropriate. Um, and that was learned entirely by emulating more senior agents to whom I looked up. Um, as the type of agents I had as role models retire or are forced out, I very much worry about who's going to be providing the example to incoming agents and how their moral character as investigators is going to develop.
New agents will also arrive at a bureau much more directed to prioritizing immigration arrests. Feinberg spent the first few months of the second Trump administration as his office's acting head, struggling to manage resources after agents were pulled into assisting ICE roundups. In one instance, Feinberg became aware of a request from an FBI agent to purchase face coverings. Anxiety was building among agents over rumors of immigration officials being filmed and doxxed on social media, and ICE employees had begun hiding their identities. Now it seemed that FBI agents in Norfolk wanted to follow ICE's lead. I was absolutely furious, Feinberg told me. We live in a democracy. We are an organization that serves the public. We do not hide from our actions. He conferred with others in the office's leadership, and they agreed to quietly prohibit office funds from being spent on masks. Do you have any idea whether, in the wake of your departure, agents in Norfolk have begun using masks?
I do not know. That paragraph actually understates how angry I was at the request and how vociferously I disagree with the concept of federal agents hiding or obfuscating their identity. What I actually said in conversation when this was first brought to my attention was, "We are not the fucking Stasi." I My views on that have not changed one iota.
As we spoke, Feinberg emphasized that he didn't necessarily object to the FBI being involved in immigration enforcement. Every president, he said, gets to choose how to direct the Bureau's priorities. The problem is the way the Trump administration has chosen to use the FBI, taking agents trained for complex investigations and having them stand around looking scary while ICE conducts immigration arrests. This overlap of the Bureau and ICE not only wastes resources, but actively undermines the Bureau's ability to investigate the very gangs that Patel and Bongino have said they want to tackle. Why, after all, would any Latin American immigrant agree to cooperate with the FBI on taking down MS-13 or Tren de Aragua if reaching out to law enforcement might well get them deported?
So that entire paragraph could have been an article or book in and of itself. And I just want to make two real points. The first is, I've heard a lot of criticism of the piece I wrote from friends who make their political homes on the left, saying that the FBI should be opposed to immigration enforcement in general if they really are moral actors. And you know what?
Yeah, but that's not
It's not a
it's
serious
not their
argument.
lane.
It's like, look, it's you don't want to live in a world where individual law enforcement officers can decide or exercise discretion as to what um procedurally sound laws have been passed by Congress, signed into law by the president, and adjudicated as constitutional by the Supreme Court.
Except as pertains to lasers, right? But
Sure,
we certainly want individual law enforcement officers exercising reasonable prudential judgment as to non-enforcement of National Park Service regulations vis-a-vis projecting on monuments.
I'm not going to comment on what may be a matter of ongoing investigation or litigation, even if it does not involve me. But look, the immigration laws that at the time we were enforcing, they're real laws. I might think they're bad as a policy matter, which I do, but it's not an FBI agent's individual responsibility to enact his or her policy preferences. Now, if we were talking about warrantless arrests under the Alien Enemies Act, which had not at that point been adjudicated by the Supreme Court, I know myself and the other executive management in Norfolk, because it was something we discussed, would have had major ethical and legal problems with assisting on those matters.
Right, you're talking about stuff that is unambiguously lawful.
Correct.
But is just I think in the department of sometimes a really shitty thing to do, and in all situations, a really dumb use of FBI resources.
Yeah, and look, as Quinta said in her last sentence, like, Kash Patel and Bongino have said in their own words, their number one priority is crushing violent crime, particularly South American gangs. I would humbly suggest you cannot crush a criminal enterprise if nobody in the community in which it moves is willing to talk to you.
Right.
You need to develop sources, and it's just idiotic the way they're doing this.
There is also the question of what leads won't be pursued because of this focus on immigration and because the FBI's leadership has pushed out the experts who know how to do such work in the first place. Feinberg, who speaks Mandarin, helped spearhead the FBI's investigation into the Chinese technology giant Huawei, which the U.S. accused of stealing trade secrets from American companies. Now that he's gone, he's not sure whether anyone working in counterintelligence at senior levels of the Bureau knows Chinese. It's particularly concerning to me as someone who has dedicated his professional career to combating the Chinese Communist Party and all of its tentacles to see resources and efforts diverted away from hostile foreign intelligence services and other serious threats to the homeland to focus on minor immigration status offenses, Feinberg wrote in his recent essay. Earlier this month, Patel and Bongino found themselves tied up in the ever-widening Jeffrey Epstein scandal, having hinted to the MAGA faithful at damning revelations only to come up empty-handed. They're now struggling to explain themselves. When I asked Feinberg about this, he sounded more exasperated than ever, than anything. They get a kick out of playing dress up and acting tough, he said, but they actually have no idea what they're doing. Um, so here's my question.
Yeah.
Is a clown with a flamethrower more or less dangerous than a serious person, a malevolent person with a flamethrower?
Equal. I mean,
It's just a different danger.
yeah, I mean, we are in, I think the exact phrase I used when talking to Quinta was that we're in the cosplay era of American law enforcement. You know, these are people who, despite having disparaged the FBI and the law enforcement intelligence communities for the past 8 years, now think nothing of throwing on raid jackets and badges and guns, none of which they personally earned, and going to command posts and acting tough and posing for pictures during arrests. Um,
Well, we seem to have lost Mike. Um, uh, let's see. We may have lost everybody. Um, uh, if Hey, Mike.
Apologies. Hey, I'm not sure what happened there.
No, you suddenly vanished, and I couldn't tell whether you had vanished or whether I had vanished.
I don't know either because you froze and then vanished for me. So
Well, you just vanished.
okay,
I just want to say I reserve the right as somebody who benefits multiple times a day from the near perfection of the streaming economy, many meetings, to complain bitterly about
yeah,
every minor glitch.
yep,
So yeah, anyway, you were saying.
yeah. I don't know where I got cut off, but like we're in what I refer to as the cosplay era of American law enforcement. Patel, Bongino, Bondi, they throw on raid jackets, they carry firearms. Patel has taken to wearing a badge. None of these people earned those items. None of them understand the weight of responsibility that they impose. They're playing dress up and trying to look tough and pose for photo opportunities. Like, it's a joke. What is happening to the FBI, what is happening to the federal law enforcement community in general, is heartbreaking for those of us who worked in it and should be terrifying for the average American who relies on it for his or her safety. Like,
So
these aren't grown ups.
I want to ask you what we know about FBI public opinion on this subject. We obviously don't take polls
Yeah,
of bureau people, and and people who talk in groups together are obviously self-selected.
correct.
But do you have a sense of is your contempt for the cosplay culture widely shared, or is
I think it is, yeah. You mentioned the selection bias problem in terms of who I'm going to be talking to, but I served in 3 field offices and headquarters. 2 of those field offices were the largest in the FBI, or among the largest, and one of them was one of the smallest. I think Norfolk is now the second or third smallest office in the Bureau. I don't know anybody from any of those offices. And at least in Norfolk, I literally knew everybody. It's not that big, and I was the acting SAC for quite some time. Everybody had contempt for the way that these people were dressing up. And the one exception to my self selection is I still talk to a lot of my graduating class from the academy. And, you know, among that group are a number of people who are very much politically conservative and Trump supporters. And they think it's fucking ridiculous that Patel is wearing a badge and, Bongino is training in firearms. Like, this is just...
does that cause them cognitive dissonance? Because for me, Patel and Bongino are a logical and natural extension of Trump. They've been what I've been
Yeah.
learning about since 2016, when I flagged the FBI, replacing the leadership of the FBI as one of the critical things you could do to erode, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've been imagining Kash Patel for a long time, but it does seem to me integral to the idea of Trumpism. And what I can't understand is having contempt for it and still, believing that it's somehow disconnected from the ethos from the top.
It's funny. During the 2016 election, I saw in conversation, not like an official office dialogue, but you talk to people over drinks or coffee outside the office. Like, I knew a lot of people who were supporting Trump. I mean, I'd say the majority of the Bureau probably was. I didn't hear that in the 2024 election. Now, there's differences. I was not a case agent during the 2024. I was either the highest in command or the second in command of an entire office. So people were probably not going to divulge their political opinions to me. But I saw much less support for the MAGA movement in 2024 among the Bureau population than I did in 2016. And I think part of that is the result of, like, we all knew Chris Wray was going to be gone, whether through being fired by Trump or his own... I'll leave it at that. And we were all pretty worried about who was going to take over for us. There was a brief ray of hope when the press was reporting that former Congressman Mike Rogers, who himself was an FBI agent at one point and chaired the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, was in the running. It became pretty apparent that was not going to happen. And once Patel was officially nominated, I don't know a person who was enthusiastic at the prospect.
But there's enthusiastic, and then there's the question of whether you see it, whether it creates cognitive dissonance with your otherwise tolerant attitude toward the president, strikes me as a different question of whether you think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I was always very tight-lipped about my personal politics in the Bureau. I think I relayed to you at one point. I went out to lunch a couple weeks ago with somebody with whom I used to work, a line agent who has since retired, and he said that it was sort of like an ongoing sport at the office to try and guess what my affiliations and beliefs were, and nobody really had any idea. So I don't know that I would have been the natural person that people went to express those sentiments.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really difficult for me to answer your question.
We are going to leave it there.
Mhm.
A live reading of a profile with the subject. Who knew? We'll be back tomorrow.